recording is already there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think let others join. We will continue to discuss. Okay, any questions? Today is our last day of interaction. And any questions before we start the day's session? Any anxieties? Yes.
No, it is the final session today. I
Yeah.
don't say last, we can say final for this round.
Our term.
And almost all of us are in hurry to complete the assignment, and then of course the internship project and final examination. We are
Wonderful.
excited, not anxious, excited, we should say.
Very
Thank
good.
you, sir.
Very good. That's the spirit. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Anybody else wants to say anything?
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, madam.
Sir, last session you said, sir, give some ideas about our assignments also.
Assignment questions you would have already received, right?
Yes, sir, received it, sir.
So any difficulty in that?
Not much difficulty, but we are wondering we can write it on our own or is through the books or.
I think this course is basically a very practical applied course.
Okay, sir.
Based on your experience, if you bring your experience into the responses to the assignment, that will be unique. It will be value addition.
Okay, sir. Okay.
If you write bookish, the evaluators may not be really appreciating that.
Okay, sir.
I think all of you are well-experienced people. None of you are, freshers. So therefore, you should bring something from your own experience and present it and make the entire assignment exciting.
Okay, sir. We'll do that, sir.
Right. Okay. Any others? All right. Since we have no other, contribution to make today, let's start. Today happens to be the last 2 sessions for the subject for this term in the course Development Center Management. And the course has been very well prepared. I would say the curriculum has been well prepared. We have first understood the basic competency requirement and the frameworks. Then we have looked at what are the assessment centers and the development centers. And in those, among those two, we have looked at more in detail the development centers because training and development or L&D is basically concerned with the development aspect of the management mainly. You're going to do a lot of development activity, and therefore the course has rightly been focused on the DC activities, how the entire DC is organized and managed. And today we will see the last part of the DC management, and that is how do you generate the feedback and how do you generate the report and the feedback. The essence of DC Development Center is creating an agenda for the development of the individual, and therefore the entire DC activity culminates into preparation of the final report based on which individual development plans are prepared, and then between the DC report and the individual development plan, you have the interface of the feedback, which is very, very key component in the development center's report. And that feedback enables individual development plan in such a way that it benefits the individual in his career growth or her career growth, and it helps the organization to improve its competitiveness in the marketplace, and therefore it can retain its market position. So it is a win-win situation, and we have earlier briefly touched upon a DC report, how it goes into what goes into a DC report. So in today's session, we're going to discuss more in detail as to how the DC report is prepared, what are the components of it, and how is it going to be benefiting the organization as well as the individual. So DC report obviously should lead to 2 things. One, a very objective, fair, and useful feedback to the individual, and that would lead to preparation of individual development plan. then based on the progress made, generally the IDP, the duration of IDP is about 6 months to 2 years, depending on the nature of the development that you are looking at. And therefore, the IDP should be prepared keeping in mind what are the end requirements or the end goals of the organization and the individual. If the end goals can be met in 6 months, it will be a 6 months period IDP. If it is a 2-year period, then it is a 2-year period IDP. Then at the end of that, you will also make decisions on the individual, whatever you want to do with him or with her in their career positioning. And there are certain techniques which can be deployed in the development of the individual. These are pure HR concepts. We have borrowed them into the T&D from the human resource management. So you would have probably heard of job rotation, job enrichment, and things like that, job enlargement. There are several techniques that we use in HR. Those same very techniques are used here, though not in the same detail as it is done in the human resource management. And then the DC report also is useful for any decision related to deploying a person on a new project assignment, succession planning in terms of being a successor to a certain position, if required, a change in the role, and of course, job enrichment is the important thing that one is looking at in the job, the DC process. Now, DC process has to be viewed, therefore, as an integrated portion of the entire individual's development. You cannot simply say, okay, the DC is over, I prepared the report, my job is done. The DC has to be ultimately an action-oriented report, which will benefit the individual and the organization. So what actually goes into the DC report, I think we have previously touched upon. Basically, there is a structure which need not be the same for every organization. It can be adopted. So what we are discussing today is something which is a generic kind of a structure for the DC report. Obviously, it starts with what the organization, what the objectives are, what competencies are being looked at, and how they have been evaluated, and evaluation, the description that has been done for each competency, the evaluation method, and all that. We look at the structure of that. And if you are defining some scales, a DC report should also mention specifically the scales that you have used, so that the person who is reading the report can actually, the person who is reading the report can understand what competencies and how these competencies are to be understood from that particular context perspective, right? And what are your recommendations in terms of what is to be done? So when you are reporting such an important report for the organization, which has a very significant bearing on the individuals, there are few things that every DC manager has to understand in terms of what the do's and don'ts are. The report has to be, the words, choosing of the words should be very meticulous. You should give unambiguous words and make it very, very specific, crisp, easy to understand. Don't fall upon too many jargons. Make it exhaustive to the extent possible, because you don't do the DC for a person every now and then. It has a certain validity in terms of time. It has importance in terms of individual's career growth. Preferably, it should be written in a third person's language, narrative, and in the past tense, right? You should not use the present tense in that. Don't have any lead time between the completion of DC and preparation of the report. Always a report will reflect the actual happenings if it is prepared immediately after the DC. If there is a time lag, it's quite possible that we may forget some part of it, maybe leave out some part of it, or try to substitute something because of lack of our own memory or organizational abilities in terms of the information there. And therefore, please prepare the DC report as soon as the process is over, and then make it very unbiased, very truthful, and meaningful to the organization and the individual. What are the don'ts? Don't give any judgments from yourself as an evaluator or as an assessor. We are not supposed to bring in our own opinions and views on the individuals who are participating. Unless you have evidence to justify what you're mentioning in the report, don't mention. Opinions do not have any justification or the evidences. They are generally the perceptions of the people who are writing the report. And do not include contradictory references. Read it, reread it, reread it, and make sure that you yourself do not make any contradictory remarks in the report while you suggest one way in the one competency. Don't go for diametrically opposite approach in the second competency. Do not make any derogatory remarks on any one of the candidates, because they're all ultimately our own colleagues, right? Now, what goes into the report? I think we have previously mentioned about it, but once again, let us refresh what are the components of a DC report. First, a brief profile of the participant. Yes, Jagannath ji.
Sir, as you mentioned about the comments about the participants, but like calling a spade, whether we should follow this strategy or we should give the sugar-coated remarks.
No, I'm not saying you should not be calling a spade a spade. You should be, but it should be backed by evidence, by observations of the assessors. It should not be an inference or an opinion by the assessor, not backed by what happened in the DC process.
In the material, I have read this that instead of saying this, you should say like this. Means like as you mentioned rightly, the evidence that you behaved in this way and this could have been this way. But first, emphasize on your own behavior, and then you can comment upon this should have been ideal, or you could have behaved in another options wise like that. Thank you.
You see, any report of DC is meant for the development of the concerned person. So the whole goal is not to criticize or not to create any controversy. You will have to present it in such a way that you are truthful, honest, unbiased, and yet the message is conveyed to the person where the person has to improve. Because it is given, the report is given for the benefit of the individual, and hence, if it is presented in an appropriate way, in all likelihood, the feedback will be received well, and the recommendations of the DC will be ultimately implemented, which will benefit both the individual and the organization. If you write the report in such a way that it puts off the individual, then the whole purpose is defeated. That is the whole objective. Okay. Yeah.
Right, sir. Thank you. But again, the receptivity of the person receiving that, we should call it actually constructive feedback, and how he receives it and implements upon it, that is the key. Thank you very much.
In fact, that is one of the competencies of the people who are writing the report. See, they should know how to, I'm not saying it should be sugar-coated. Sugar-coated gives a wrong meaning. They should know how to present it appropriately with the right kind of words. Then you are actually conveying what you want to convey. And if the receiver also understands that you have been very honest in your reporting, and he is convinced that it is backed by the evidence, then obviously the individual will also take it in the right spirit. If the report gives an opinion, a view that he or she is being targeted instead of being given a prescription for development, then it is unlikely that the individual will take the recommendations to their logical conclusion. Okay. Right. Now, the issue is the whole development center is concentrated on around the competencies. Competencies are not easy to understand. Competencies are the most complicated. One of the reasons why the competency based management of talent in organization is not taking fully full effect is it is not easy to define competencies. It is not easy to understand the competencies in the same way across all the locations of the organization in all the departments. And it is not easy to be very unbiased about the competency assessment. And therefore, the competency assessment has not been as much as it should have been in the followed in the organizations, right? Therefore, your document should mention, in fact, the requirement for the DC has to be very clearly drafted by the concerned department, whether it is HR or HR in consultation with the line management. What are those competencies that the DC has to focus on? What is the meaning of those DCs? And if it is possible, they should also mention, what kind of, assessment methodology would be beneficial for them in case it is industry specific. So what you require to say is, you define the competencies in the report very clearly, because at the end of the report, you are going to mention for that particular competency what your feedback is going to be. And that feedback will be read by the departmental managers, whoever is the concerned stakeholder, and that person will provide the feedback to the participant, and hence the entire thread should be uniformly understood. Now, the key thing is, in the DC, multiple assessors are going to observe the participants, and they're going to make their own report. So it is unlikely that all of them will have the same report and same observations for an individual, because each one of us have our own way of looking at things, and therefore our perspective, we give a feedback, or we note the points through our observation from our own perspective. So at some point before preparing the report, these points are to be collated. If there is any ambiguity, it has to be discussed among the assessors, and they have to come to some kind of a clear understanding of what they want to communicate to the organization about an individual. So each of those observations have to be carefully looked at, and they have to be properly and sequentially presented. Now, the description of performance competency-wise, we will look at some examples now. And the summary of performance of the individual as an overall summary, how do you look at the individual, that has to be recorded. After that, you need to provide what is the advice and what actions are you suggesting for the individual to be able to understand that it is for his or her development. And in the last part of the report, you need to mention what are those development steps that you're recommending, which the organization should take forward. Right? I think here are some examples as you were discussing, Jagannath-ji. Now, avoid the use of adjectives. Avoid he was aggressive in his behavior. Instead, specify what he did denotes aggressiveness. I think there is a difference in the way it is presented, though it is probably pointing to the same aggressiveness. The way it is presented is very different. Use of adverbs is preferable. He spoke clearly. His voice was very clear. I think that these minor things can make a report much more effective. And avoid he never participated. Instead of that, you write he participated occasionally. Yes, sir.
No, in fact, this whole purpose of AC and DC, means first AC and then DC, according to me, should be the only purpose of making the person travel from good for nothing to good for anything. This is what I conceive it. While he is entering into AC assessment center, and maybe organization is thinking, or his colleagues, superiors, peers are thinking that he is good for nothing, and after passing through development center, he should be probably become the person good for anything. Thank you, sir.
Okay, that's what we say in organizational parlance. We call it as from an ordinary performance to extraordinary performance. The person is the same, the organization is the same. Here you are trying to transform the person. There's an intervention. DC is an intervention by the management for a productive purpose. The ultimate goal is just an ordinary person. You want to transform him or her through his own involvement and preparation of the individual development plan and implementing it, which will lead him or her to make an exceptional performance in the organization that will be rewarding and satisfying to the individual, that will be economically benefiting the organization because the productivity of the individual improves, right? From ordinary to extraordinary is the catchphrase there. Write the reports in the past tense, avoid using present or future tenses. Write the approximate amount of time that can be taken for a DC report ranges from 1 to 2 hours. Some assessors may require more or less time, more or less time than this. It all depends on how experienced you are. As you become more and more seasoned, your ability to write the reports improves, and you will use more appropriate terms for preparation of the report. Here is the example that is given in the textbook, how the introduction was presented. So you can have a quick look at it. Why am I presenting all this is because in your examination, if there's a question on, provide a sample report or a demo report for a particular situation, assuming some 3 or 4 components of certain individuals have to be improved. So you have to create, you have to imagine, you have to write something on your own, based either on your own experience or based on what you are reading or what you are discussing now in these sessions. So this is important for you to make a note. It is not ruled out that you will not have a question which says, please write an indicative DC report, how it looks like with all the structural requirements of the report. Yeah. So have a quick look at this. If you have any question, you can ask me. And this is not the final word on preparation of report. It is just one way of presenting it. Some of you probably can prepare even better reports. Any question? All right. Now, see, obviously in the DC, we are going to talk about the areas of strengths and the areas of weakness of the individual. Now, we are looking at here the areas of strength. Activity is sales pitch. Competency measured is communication. Now, there is a score given here, 4 out of 5. Now, this 4 out of 5 is a scale that you have defined. We will look at the scale also. This is defined by the development center, and what that 4 out of 5 means is demonstrated good communication skills, showed confidence in approach, and was clear when speaking. Now, these were this is the summary of the observations made on this individual by the assessors at the development center. I think it is very specific, it is unambiguous, and it communicates what this 4 means on a scale of 5. Now, what is the feedback given here? Now, even for a positive, assessment, there can still be a feedback, and that feedback need not necessarily be just price. It can also lead to some more improvement. You are very clear in the sales pitch in voicing your product and trying to convince us to buy it. Good thinking on a short notice of time to come up with an idea. Showed eye contact and demonstrated a belief in the product you are selling. Just be sure to keep your shoulders back and stand straight. It will allow you to be clear and show confidence. So while it praises the individual in certain dimensions of his sales pitch or her sales pitch, it also tells us what are those finer things that an individual can do to make himself or herself much more effective. Any question? Okay. The second one is, the first one is the activity is sales pitch. The second one is the activity is interview. And again, the competency measured here is critical thinking and communication. The score on communication is 4 out of 5. Critical thinking is 3 out of 5. So there are 2 different scores given, but the activity is the same. Now look at the feedback and how it is written. You were quite a reserved person who is happy to follow along with instructions. You didn't hesitate from this and were confident in letting us know the type of worker you want to be. It is good in the world of business to be able to follow instructions precisely and be a good team member. Perhaps still, it would be useful to you in voicing your opinion now and again in workplace to find other ways to contribute. So this is the trick of the report preparation in the DC. You have this is a very mild way of communicating. Good, buddy, you are doing well, but I think you can still improve. So even in your area of strength, there is no finish line. You can still improve further. Now the next one is the forest fire is the activity's name, and again they have assessed communication, teamwork, and critical thinking. Communication here is 2 out of 5, teamwork 2 out of 5, critical thinking 3 out of 5. So what do they mean by this? Communication in this teamwork, lack of speaking and confidence, very passive with the little to nothing said. And I think it's very common. We as Indians are individually brilliant, but collectively a disaster. Individually, each one of us perform well, but then if you have to do certain tasks as a group, we generally have issues to deal with the groups. Then teamwork, little contribution to the group, passive and tends to let others take control. So this is also again seen in the group activities in our own organizations, in our own settings. Several people, they just leave it to the rest of the members in the group. They don't participate, and ultimately if they have to be participating, all they will say is they're endorsing somebody else's views and let it go. Now, the feedback for this critical thinking, I think we have already seen some level of understanding and rationalizing ideas and questions. That is just around about average, but it is not really brilliant. So what does it convey in terms of the feedback to the individual? You tended to shy away from the rest of the group as others voiced their opinions. It could be seen that you understood the information in the front of you. However, you did not really voice your opinion. Despite the task being relatively simple, it would perhaps benefit you to have your say and be confident in yourself. So again, here the words are very well written, not hurting anybody, but obviously they would have had sufficient notings to be made based on the activity that they have conducted to justify their feedback to the individual. It definitely says that there are some areas for the development of the concerned person. Now, the next one is based on an IQ test, which basically measures the intelligence. Here the score is 1 out of 5, and little to no understanding of task with little application, lots of improvement needed. You will be surprised. I think recently in one of the management development programs, somebody was sharing that many managers really do not articulate what is the work to be done by their subordinates. They will either shout or they will not contribute anything. So they have very little understanding of what is happening in their own departments. And when asked by some senior member of the team in a certain meeting, some of the leaders of the departments failed to articulate what their team members do in their respective departments. Now, this is not a surprise. This is actually what happened in certain organizations, was reported by somebody at a senior level. Now, whilst you did not do so well in this task, it is not to discourage you. It was definitely something out of the ordinary, and with English being your second language, it can be understood why you would struggle. The important thing is that after the answers had been explained, you understood why they made sense. It was an exercise for you to think differently, and perhaps in the future it encouraged you to have a creative mindset. I think that is what in the previous class also we discussed, that several managers at the mid-career level, they require a considerable amount of improvement in their managerial effectiveness, in their skills for being an effective manager. And one of those things is actually being very creative, and that requires a decent score in IQ tests. This is another exercise which they have reported. Now I am presenting you all these things because when you are writing your examination, you must also know not to write any, it's not some English to be presented there. I think you should be very, very precise in your application of words in this, and it should be as straightforward as possible and as simple as possible. The competency assessed is teamwork and communication and critical thinking. Here again, the scores are different. 2 out of 5 for teamwork, 2 out of 5 for communication, and 3 out of 5 for critical thinking. Right now, so forest fire is one of the activities, so let's not get into that. Some of you may be aware of it, but then we will not get into that now. You were quiet and tended to be quite passive. However, it was late in the day, and many of the others were also very quiet and passive in their activity on this activity. You understood what was being asked, and you still completed the task to the best of your ability. Perhaps, despite the fact others around you were quiet, you could voice your opinion and assert yourself in the task. I think this is a very important thing that I would like to emphasize on. A lot of people, I keep conducting a lot of group discussions and management activities for our own students. That in many groups, what I see is some of them, they're really quiet throughout. And when you push them to speak, what they would say is he will agree with one of the members present in the group and say, I'm endorsing his views or her views. They don't, for once, repeat even those qualities that they are endorsing or those information that they're endorsing. They just even don't mention. They think that I'm endorsing the views of my friends so and so or my colleagues so and so. That is B and they don't have to do any more contribution. But that's not enough. That's not enough. In managerial situations, there is so much, that one can contribute, because every situation has multiple solutions or multiple perspectives, and you need to present your perspective rather than just saying that, I am endorsing A or B. Then the assessor really doesn't know, well, you understood what the other person has presented or not, and hence that will put you to an disadvantage in your assessment report. Now, this is the conclusion. I think I'll leave this on for a while. You speak when you read this, and then you ask any questions that need to be clarified, because reading it myself doesn't look nice. Yes, Jagannath ji.
Typically, what is your experience or observation about the people who are participating in such kind of programs, whether it is ACDC or maybe we are conducting the employee engagement program once a year for all classes of our employees, and then we conduct some quizzes or games or like interactive things. The answers the people are giving, the employees are giving during such kind of exercises may it be ice breaking or may it be energizer or maybe any self-evaluation kind of thing. So how much honest though these are people while they are answering, number one. Second is the way they are behaving at the workplaces and the way they are behaving at the such kind of seminars or such kind of activities, the ACDC activities. So what is your observation? I think that most of the time it happens just like what they want to be or what they ought to be, but they don't do what they are actually. So, like as mentioned in this DC report, that you have been enthusiastic and you have been this and that. So, my question is that how much we can rely upon these kind of reports? Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, we will address that definitely. Yeah. Any other perspective from others? Mr. Anil, Shrey Kashyap, Tia. There's one with iPhone. I don't know who's there. Who is on the iPhone? Padma Priya, madam. Anything that you want to say?
No, sir, nothing, sir.
Okay. Now, the point that you have raised is very valid and very important. You know, while we say that everything should be fair, objective, and truthful and all that, some amount of, individuals will try to manipulate their own behavior. No doubt about it. But assuming that some 10% of people are doing that, but still 90% of people are benefiting by this exercise, right? And in any case, all that you can do is to tell them to be truthful about themselves. And to make them to be truthful, you have to create the trust. Now, when will I be myself when interacting with anybody? No, I can also be faking myself and not truthful to you. I think I should be true. I will be truthful. And if you take that as a standard trustworthy statement, then you will also be truthful. Otherwise, it is the whole purpose of going to either assessment center or a development center is futile. The person who doesn't have the faith in the DC process, if he goes and tries to manipulate his responses and gets a distorted report, that doesn't serve the whole purpose. So, even before sending the people to DC, one must make sure that the person who is going for the DC understands what it is, understands why it is important to be truthful and honest about himself or herself, and give the appropriate answers which are related to him and which are instantaneous, which reflect his or her behavior. If you think that I should give this answer because this gives me this benefit or this repercussion or that repercussion, then the whole purpose of DC is defeated. So the environment, the branding of DC has to be done in such a way that one who goes there should be very, very straightforward and honest about his behavior. Otherwise, if you keep acting and does not reflect what you are, then your report doesn't make any sense, isn't it?
Yes, you are right, sir. And that is what my concern is actually. How people behave in such kind of activities and how they behave at the workplace. Right. So the gap, I always find a gap in that. कि ठीक है बोलना तो एक बात है लेकिन करना या वर्कप्लेस पे कैसे बिहेव करना, that's a very different story. Means we talk about the integrity, but at the same time at the workplace we may not find that much integrity in their working style or working habits and so on so forth. This is what happened, and perhaps that is the reason why even after going through these kind of activities, when the people are promoted and put to some responsible positions, we don't get the results as depicted by these kind of reports. Thank you very much.
Very right. Very right. That is why what we have said in the DC, the very purpose of having multiple assessors and the same competency being assessed in multiple methods, using multiple methods, is that possibly you will not be able to, fake yourself in multiple situations. Some situations they suck you, and they will make you to reflect what you are. So the ability to do so much of a manipulation may not be possible when you're doing it with multiple people and multiple assessment methods. Then the real picture comes out. And if he or she is trying to hide his actual behavior and try to present a behavior that he or she thinks is desirable behavior, the contradictions can come up. And that is when the report, the observations are very valuable, and the way it is reported makes sense to the organization as to what kind of a person he or she is. Therefore, the DC process and the role of assessor is not as easy as one can imagine it to be. It's a pretty serious job. And the more you involve people in the activities, more you involve them in the or engage them in the activities, the more engagement means you will become natural self. Once you are natural self, you behave as you are. And in one game or one activity, you may hide your original self. But in the second activity, you demonstrate what you are. And there's a difference between the earlier activity to this activity. The assessor should be able to differentiate. We're looking at the body language, the facial expressions, the involvement, the use of words, all those things as to which one is the true reflection of the individual. And then they have to prepare the report in such a way that the true observations, the truth of the person or the true behavior of the person is reflected in the report with the evidence which is observations made during the activities. So it is, I mean, those who are expert in the DC process will be able to deal with these kinds of things without much of a hassle, right? Have I answered?
Okay, sir. Yeah, okay, sir. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Anybody else have any other, information to share? No. Okay. Now we talked about the scales in the previous session, and typically we use the bars, and the definition of the scales is very, very important, because not everyone defines the scales in the same way. Therefore, for your DC, for your activity, how did you define the scale and how did you use it in making a part of the report, what you have written there? So for teamwork, the definition of the scale is given here. So you have to, please, the purpose of presenting it here is that you have to be very, very meticulous in defining your scales. There should be no ambiguity, because it has a huge implication in terms of career of people and also the competitors of the organization. Look at this. They have very clearly, well defined each one of these levels of their scales for teamwork, and based on your observation on the individuals, you make which level or which number reflects the individual's performance in the teamwork. Similarly, for communication, the same scale, it's a 5-point scale, but the wordings will be different. The clarity is going to be different for each one of them. This is for the critical thinking again. So what is important, the critical point that I want you to appreciate is each competence uses maybe some scale, and the definition of scale has to be unambiguous. It should be well written and understood before the participant responds to that particular item in an activity. Now, this is again a way of bringing out the truth about the participant to the table, because if he understands, if the scales are constructed well and they communicate the correct meaning of it, then the individual also can ascribe the correct kind of rating for himself, and that will give you the true picture of the individual concerned. This is for the intelligence. For different aspects that you are using for different competencies, and obviously it goes without saying that the skills have to be created in advance. They have to be tested, and both reliability and the validity have to be tested. You have to do the piloting, and if there are some issues during the piloting, they have to be corrected. And if it is required, you also do the retesting, repiloting, and then arrive at the scales. And the usual approach of copying some of the skills from the internet available material is a very wrong way of doing it. A lot of people do it because the organizational context in which somebody else has used a scale is different from the context that which is in your organization, and therefore extrapolating some other organization scale here to our own organization is not a very healthy and good way of doing it. And okay. Now that completes what goes into the preparation of a DC. I think in one of the previous classes, somebody asked a question whether it will, at the end of this course, you will be able to understand the entire value chain of the DC. I think you will, whoever is that person, you will now get a feel that yes, this course gives you what all can be done as a part of DC with the report being presented. We come to the next part of the DC. What is feedback and how it is to be handled? Now, what is feedback? Basically, why do you need feedback and what is feedback? Do we really need feedback? Do our bosses give us feedback? Or do you give feedback to your subordinates?
Yes, sir, we do that.
Okay. How often you do it, madam?
Every now and then, sir. Whenever they do it good or when something goes wrong, whatever it is, we'll always give the feedback, sir. Whether it's a positive or if they want to improve. So,
Okay.
sir, feedback is a routine thing for us in the organization.
Do you give it in private or in public?
No, in private, sir. Not in public. Whenever something is good, now I'll do it in the public. If something goes wrong, I need to give some pointers and all. Now I do it in the private.
Okay. Why do you do that?
I don't want to discourage him because I want him to do better. It's not, I don't want him to hurt because the only thing is I want him to improve. So that's why I do.
Human nature is when you get appreciated in public, you will get elated. You think that it is a great recognition, and therefore, any feedback which is sort of an appreciation of an individual's effort should preferably be done in public so that his self-esteem goes up. His or her self-esteem goes up.
Yes,
And
yes.
it is the other way around when you want to give some critical feedback for improvement. People do not like somebody being told by somebody that you have to improve here. All of us think that we are great people, we are great souls, we are already doing very well, but not realizing that the best in the world also can be bettered. And therefore, the individuals who are working in organization definitely can be bettered provided they get appropriate inputs about where are the areas where they can improve. But that has to be done with great care. And therefore, any input feedback related to development, criticism of an individual, do it only in private. Don't do it in public. That's a very good and healthy practice so that your subordinates feel that, yes, you have been very nice to them. If you give the negative feedback in the presence of other colleagues, then in all likelihood, you're burning your bridges with that particular person because he or she will not take it lightly because it hurts their personal ego. Okay? Yeah. What is basically feedback in the organizational context? You are giving some information to the concerned employee about something he or she has done in the organization. It can be an activity like sales, or it can be a process in the manufacturing activity of the organization. But the idea is that your observation is a valid observation. You're communicating it to the concerned individual in a positive way and in a conducive manner in the right moment so that he or she will be benefited in the when they go through the same kind of activity next cycle. So the improvement is what is development, and that is a result of the feedback that is being provided to the concerned participant. It is an effective mechanism through which the participants are made aware or conscious of their observed behavior in controlled circumstances and how they display their proficiency with respect to the specified competencies of the organization. Often the problem is that the person who gives feedback in the organization may not be familiar with the person who is receiving the feedback. That is one constraint that you always see. And typically in the organizations, no line manager wants to give feedback for development to his or her team member. They feel that by doing or conveying the negative feedback, it is really not negative. It is a feedback for the development. Unfortunately, it is interpreted as negative feedback, and they palm it off to the HR persons and ask them to provide the required feedback so that they can maintain their relationship. The underlying assumption here is that if I give any development feedback to the employee, I may be misunderstood if I am not given some benefit or reward. Then immediately the concerned employee will blame the line manager. I know this guy has done this because I have not done a very good job in the DC center activities. So you have to be very, very careful how you give the feedback, and at what stage, in what doses, in what tone and tenor, in what kind of physical settings you want to give. All these things make a huge difference to the concerned individual. The grounds of feedback are usually laid down very clearly before the DC begins. That is because you have been identified for the DC based on some weakness that you have. The organization already is aware that you require some development, and therefore you have been chosen for the development process. So and one has to be the individuals has to approach or at least have the courtesy to thank the organization. Somebody has made the effort to identify his weakness or identify the areas for his development, and that is going to lead to his growth. Why should otherwise organizations spend their time, money, and energy on the development of individuals? Because organizations need people, and people also need organization, right? So at the end of the DC process, let the candidate not feel shy of participating in this and getting some feedback for his improvement. It should rather be welcomed by the individual, because he is very well aware that right from the beginning he has been chosen for this DC process, because the organization wants him to change in certain areas for his or her growth. Yeah. Now, what are the key elements of feedback? It is to the person's behavior professionally, not personally, and not on the character of the person. Right? If you have to rate me on my performance, you should rate me on what I'm doing in this session. But if some of you spot me in the evening in a pub or a bar, and then you want to give a feedback on my being in the bar or a pub, that doesn't reflect the true feedback. You have to, the personal elements of the individual should not be touched upon. That is what it means. Must cover the strengths and not just focus on the development areas. This is a human psychological problem. we are all good at finding out and picking up the negatives faster than the positives in any context. So when the report is being prepared, it is but natural that we spend more time on the areas for development or the negative areas of the individual, and the positive things are not adequately highlighted. But as a technique, to start the report with an appreciation of the individual, and you spend some time on the praise for the individual because of what he is, which made him today is the contribution of his behaviors, then automatically the mind gets open. Then you can get into some areas of critical behavior of the person and where he or she needs to improve. And then when will you improve? When do you feel that you will improve? I mean, all of us know if we do certain things, we will improve, but we don't do. Why don't we do what we know is going to improve? Which factor makes us not to really learn, although we know if we learn such and such a thing, it will benefit us. Yeah? Please participate. What is an important principle of adult learning? According to Cole, one of the important principles of adult learning is yes.
Sir, in adult learning, you take the responsibility yourself of, learning as an adult. So you are responsible for your own learning. And
Provided,
that's a key principle.
provided that learning has an immediate gain for me.
Yes.
Right? If you tell me I am 40 years old, let us say, and you give me something which is a gyan for the age of 50 or 60, I am not going to be interested. I will not take responsibility. If you tell
Yes.
a person who is at the age of 40 and tell him how should he manage his retirement benefits at the age of 60, he is not going to be keen about it. Right? So
Yes, sir.
one important thing that you have to keep on repeating without being hyping is how this development process is going to benefit him in the immediate or the near future. So that immediate or the near future is the trigger for somebody to actually learn.
Right.
Yeah. And also, please provide some examples, give some stories of how people have been benefited in the past by taking this piece of the feedback in provided by the development center. If you have some experiences or some stories of individuals who are part of the training center or the development center and they were immensely benefited, they have gone to a senior position, that will get you the buy-in. Yes, madam. Tia, madam.
Yes, sir. Sir, like I can give an example of my own this thing that I am working for a university. I am a Unison. And the reason why I've taken up this course is because I think I can do a better job at training the students when it comes to facing the job interviews, training them for GDs and group discussions and interviews. And also because my college is planning to, kind of upgrade and foray into corporate training. So which is why I am taking that particular responsibility of taking up this course, with as much dedication and consciousness as I can. So that in a way I think is an example of adult learning. If I want, I will learn. If I want, I will not learn. Nobody is forcing me. So it's that internal motivation due to which I've taken up the responsibility, and which is why I'm trying to do justice with the course. Because somewhere I feel it's going to benefit me in the short run and in the long run. So that's a small example from my own life itself.
Very
We are
good.
all adult learners here, sir. At the end of the day.
We are all, yes. And we remain to be till we die. Yes, Jagannath ji.
In fact,
Yes,
this applies
absolutely,
to
sir.
all professional courses because we are going on. while we were in schools and colleges, we went to schools and colleges because our parents had sent us. Here for professional courses, it is we who have sent us. So obviously, thank you.
Yeah, that is the difference between pedagogy and andragogy. We are basically people who follow the andragogy, and here
No,
there is
more than that, sir. It is more than that. It is what about the like TRG said just now. It is the dedication and it is the wholehearted participation or like that. What is motivating me? What is triggering me? So, like I mentioned in chat box also, the WIIFM. So that plays more part in kind of this adult learning. Thank you.
very good. Yes. Yeah. Anybody else wants to share any examples, any other perspectives? Shrey Kashyap, Anil. Okay. So,
Yeah, just a very small kindergartenish type of an example. But sir, here like a difference could be that like a small child, उस बेचारे को history भी पढ़ाते हैं, civics भी पढ़ाते हैं, moral science भी पढ़ाते हैं, knowing that half of the things is not going to benefit him in any way in the near future or coming future or any which ways. Somebody who's wanting to be an artist is forced to study mathematics and things like that. So that I think would not be an adult learning. Because अब इस समय कोई मुझसे बोले that you have to sit and study physics and chemistry and bio, obviously that will not be counted into adult learning. I'm doing a course in which, as he said, with him, what is there in it for me. So a child is not able to decipher key what it's there in it for me. So that could be a difference between a normal learning which we have to go through, everybody has to go through, and what we are doing, in this course.
okay, good. I think the basic adult learning requirement is that you have to keep on emphasizing what is there in it for the individual. If that buy-in happens, you are able to get the attention of the learner. If you are not able to get that buy-in, obviously you will not be able to get the attention of the individual. Like you said rightly, if I discuss with you about the development center, you are interested because you feel that there's an immediate takeoff for you in terms of its application, maybe recognition in your organization, and eventually some career growth. But if I teach you something about, some financial derivatives and investments in some different kinds of money generating activities and all that, you may not be interested because you're at this point of your career, you are looking at your career growth, not your wealth growth. Maybe at some other time, maybe you will be. So each one of us have our own requirements at different points of our life, and then what is relevant to us, we decide, not anybody else. And if it is appealing to us, we will follow that. But since you have raised the point, a child has to be taught mathematics, history, science, and all that, because children cannot decide what they want to learn or what they should learn. But by experience, the instructional designers know what a child needs in the future. Even an artist needs mathematics. Artist also probably needs the geography and history. All these things, they play their role at some point in their life. And therefore, the capsule of knowledge that we give in the school level is decided by certain experts as to what is required in making a person a holistic person. Because you cannot live with only art or computer science or psychology. Life requires much more than one discipline. Life is a combination of so many disciplines itself, and therefore we need to learn. If you look at the new education policy, which is National Education Policy 2020, that actually recognizes this. A lot of problems that many of these software engineers face is because of the lack of this holistic understanding of the knowledge and the life science, life skills. And therefore, several problems they face in their personal life as well as professional life. The National Education Policy 2020 emphasizes that a child should be given various kinds of inputs for him or her to make his life holistic. And hence, All those things are given at the school level. But as you are all right, that we are going to deal with the adult learners, and adult learners will value what benefits them in the immediate future, not after a gap of several years of time, and therefore give the performance feedback in such a way that they will realize and recognize the importance of that, and they will start immediately implementing what you're giving as a part of your development process recommendations. Then precise examples and data should be provided while giving the feedback. I think the experienced assessors will know from their past experience how some individuals have benefited immensely because of following their the feedback and the recommendations, and hence the individual concerned will be motivated to take this feedback serious and also implement it once he or she goes back to his own workplace. The participant should also be encouraged to explore alternative behaviors that can have better impact on them. While you give certain perspectives and recommendations on the individual, it is also for the individual, as you all pointed out rightly. The final responsibility for development rests with the individual, not on the organization. Organization can facilitate, organization can accelerate, organization can invest, but ultimate responsibility has to be taken by the individual concerned, and therefore they can also look at what other alternative behaviors can be possible so that the impact on their career growth can be better. These 3 or 4 assessors are not the finished line. They are the assessors today. Hopefully, they would have had much better experience than what the individual concern is there. But it is not that these people can give you all the dimensions or all exhaustive feedback. So one has to also keep his own ways of understanding what alternative behaviors are there possibly for making better impact. At no point of time, participants' self-respect must be hurt during the feedback process. I think that we have been emphasizing time and again. Now, providing the feedback should be given individually or during one-on-one discussions. The earlier point that Padapriya madam was talking about is performance related. If somebody achieves an outstanding sale figure in a particular week, that can be announced and even that can be celebrated. Call all the sales team to a hotel, have them a good dinner in one nice swanky restaurant or a hotel. That's fine. But as far as possible, the DC feedback is concerned, you must do it on a one-on-one basis, and that means you have to give the individual feedback. It should be in a separate room or in a virtual DC. And this is another point which is very important. Giving feedback in a virtual form is very, very dangerous, because in virtual environment, you are whatever you speak is known to everybody else in the on the call, and therefore anything sensitive you speak can hurt the individual concern, and therefore you should be very, very careful. And if it is possible, opt for a breakout room. A breakout room is not possible, wait for an opportunity for you to meet the concerned individual, provide the feedback individually. It should start by making the individual feel comfortable and by inviting them to share their experience about the DC process. Now, obviously, how do you make somebody feel comfortable? Don't shoot the feedback right from the time the meeting starts. Maybe have a cup of coffee, have a chat, ask them their experience in the DC, ask them how they have felt during the entire process, ask them what can be done better, things like that. And then slowly you start providing the feedback so that they start receiving. First, you are preparing the ground for them to receive, and then you are actually providing the feedback so that it is actually internalized. It is received and internalized by the concerned person. There should not be any interruptions in the form of calls or emails or visitors. I think it's a very, very important thing. A feedback and individual development plan are very important. And no, the importance of the person also should not be undermined by saying that, or by projecting or pretending that you are extremely busy, you are getting so many emails, so many telephone calls and all. During the period of feedback giving, you should abstain from taking any of those calls or attending any of those emails and all that, and tell the person that I am here only because I'm concerned about you and I want you to develop. And therefore, I'm 100% giving myself to your requirements. That is one way to communicate that you mean business, also you mean concern, and also that you can send a positive signal to the concerned individual that they should take their feedback seriously. The ambience should be comfortable and make the participant open to receive the feedback. Now, the way you say it, the way you shake hand, the way you smile at the person, your body language, all these things matter because you want the individuals to open up. They have to speak. They have to share their experience. And then you will share what the assessments are. Assessments are more in terms of prescriptions here. And therefore, to get that prescription accepted, you first get yourself accepted by the concerned individual and create an environment for that. Now, we talked about the feedback ending up as an individual development plan, IDP. Now, any plan requires certain amount of time frame. A plan without a timeline is not a plan. That is as simple as that. That is as simple as that. So make sure when you are discussing, you're going to call somebody for the DC feedback meeting, you also have very clear idea as to what are those areas where you want this person to improve or develop and how much time you should give. Should it be 6 months? Should it be 1 year? Should it be 2 years? And anything beyond 2 years is not worth talking in that meeting because you are going to look at a medium term perspective. Maybe after 2 years, if he has to come again for this DC, these areas of competences where he is lacking or she is lacking, those competencies should have improved and they should no longer be the deficiencies or the areas for development for the individual. Make the participant feel comfortable and understand how the participant experience the whole process. Allow the participant to reflect. Allow the participant to share. Allow the participant to come out his own experience. Don't put him or put her off when they are living the experience and sharing with you their own self. That is the best way. That is the best way to transcend them into accepting the feedback that you're going to provide. So listen to them first, and then they will listen to you. If you don't have the ears for them, they don't have the ears for you. If you don't show the concern for their, reflections, they don't have the concern for your own reflections, although it is for them. So these are all the things that that we see even in day-to-day life in our own experiences. But in a DC, they happen by design. You are an experienced feedback provider. You are an experienced assessor. You're an experienced person who will provide all these things because your job is that. Your job is not just to make an assessment, but your job is also to communicate your feedback in a manner in which the development of the individual is the prime priority of the organization. So for many of them, when they come to the development center, they come with a lot of anxiety. So for them, it may be a first-time experience, and therefore, some kind of warm-up time where the individual concerned will explain what happened to them and what their original perception about themselves was, and what is their perception about themselves now. Things like that can be very, very meaningful before you provide the feedback to them so that they accept your feedback. It is quite possible that the development center has made certain observations and the individual has his own perception of himself. And both may not tally. Both may be, in fact, contradicting. In which situation, you will have to be very careful in dealing with them. Don't get into argument. Don't get into any judgment. Don't get into any bossism kind of a thing. You simply it is quite possible that sometimes the observations by the concerned assessors could also be biased for whatever the reason, or could be wrong, and therefore you give some time and say that you will check back and revert to the individual concerned, right? If the individual sees the performer's his own perception of his performance and the assessor's assessment of the competencies, behaviors related to those competencies, then you are pretty lucky. But there will be some differences. After all, you are dealing with something which is not pure science, and therefore you can have some differences. So try to explain why those differences are, and don't get into argumentation, don't get into fightings. It's always safe that when you say something about the behavior of an individual, you also have the evidence in terms of which time, what activity, with whom, and what was your behavior, and then justify what your assessment is. It should all be done at a professional level, not at a personal level. Let the receiver feel that I am being given this job as a part of my profession, and nobody is targeting me and nobody is criticizing me in my personal capacity. And quite often, we assume whatever we said is what the other person has heard. Unfortunately, many times what you hear is different from what you would have listened, right? Therefore, if there is some kind of a difference, you must further examine them, and where necessary, you must reconcile them. Okay. Any questions related to feedback at this point in time? Questions related to feedback?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other point that you all want to add to giving feedback? Yes, sir.
Usually we say that, or even I am used to follow this kind of method while seeking feedback, that it should be anonymous, so that the feedback giver will give it without any fear or without any favor. My question is, when suppose after receiving the feedback, maybe good or bad, suppose the people who have sought the feedback and they want to act upon it, suppose they want to have some clarification, then it will be difficult for them to reach the person, because it is the anonymous feedback. It is name not given. Number one. Second is, means this is about the clarification. Second is, can there be the rebound or like boomerang kind of thing कि feedback ऐसा दिया तो उसके साथ ऐसा बर्ताव होगा. Typically this can happen, means people can revolt or they can retaliate for giving maybe not favorable feedback. So what should be the proper thing? If the name is given, definitely people will not give proper feedback, definitely, because there is the fear of getting retaliated, number one. So if we give anonymous, then how to seek the clarification? Thank you very much.
Okay, now first of all, as far as the development center is concerned, the question of anonymous feedback does not arise. It is a professional job. It is often paid for. There's a cost involved. There are several people involved. There are a lot of investments involved. So there is no question of giving any anonymous feedback as such. For example, there are some 4 assessors. The report does not say A said this, B said this, C said this, D said this. It will be a combined report of all the 4. Before writing the report, all the 4 will sit together, and if there are differences among them, they will sort out before facing the individual concern. Right? So it doesn't matter whose opinion, whose observation is that particular point. It can be different people making different observations, or sometimes the observations can be somewhat different, and they will sit together and they will reconcile. Once it is reconciled, it is the report of the development center, not any individual. Therefore, it cannot be ascribe to a person and say, oh, he has not given me a good feedback, therefore I'm going to revenge him. In fact, in these cases, most of the time, there's nothing to take revenge on. If the development center is an indeed standalone external body, then you have really nothing to do with them. Once the report is gone to the company, it is gone, and after that, you have nothing to do with these people who are there in the development center. Assuming that even the development center is there in the organization and it is done internally also, it is a process. You know, any assessment, you cannot take an aggressive posture against the people who are doing it. After all, as long as you understand that they are doing it for my betterment, you will not have any such fear or anger against the person. But if there is a crisis of trust, you know, what you're saying, I can understand. If the credibility is at stake for the development center, then whatever you are saying is possibly applicable. But that is not then it is, you are not dealing with the development center. You are actually, if you are a development center, you will not take sides. And if you don't take sides, everything that is given is professionally given. And if everything is given professionally, then there's no reason why people would not be interested in listening to your report, because you have prepared the report for them. You are not prepared a report for you. My development plan that you are suggesting is for myself. And therefore, why should I have any revenge about anybody? There's no need, right? But that is easy to say, but actions should prove that, yeah, this development center report is for my betterment. And that is why we said earlier, give them the stories where those who have come and participated in the development center, taken the feedback in the right state, gone back and implemented the recommendations made, and have moved fast forwarded their career in the company, which will give a convincing response to the individual concerned that I have to take it in a very positive way because somebody else is working for me. It is not, if I work for myself, it's no big deal. But if I work for your betterment, that's a big deal, no? Isn't it, Jagannathji? I think that is
Yes,
what
sir,
is
you are right. Yes, you are right. No, I was talking about the general feedback system, which we are following up at the training centers. Like
please,
when we are having our training centers and we are asking the participants to give feedback, and people, they do insist you write your name. Then after writing the name, people are very hesitant even to make the genuine feedback also, and so improvements do not happen. क्यों अपने ही लोग हैं तो क्यों पंगा लेने का ऐसा means this what I can say mentality can come when you have to write the name. When you don't have to write the name, then yes, you
I
can
want
give
to
any kind of.
let us make a differentiation. Now,
Yeah,
development center is a specific way of doing the evaluation. And it goes through a lot of protocols before the process is finalized. The kind of training feedback that you're talking is not as rigorously done as it is in a development center. And the implications of that feedback and this feedback are different. Here, the feedback is done. After all, this requires a lot of investment per head. And once this is done, the development center is done, it is done very rigorously. The report has some sanctity to that. The feedback has some sanctity to that. The organization and the HR department of the organization is bound to take it serious in terms of taking the individual's development plans. But the kind of feedback that you're talking about is, right, if I'm a training center head and I conduct a training program, the training program is lousy, and then, perhaps if I ask for a feedback, all of them may say satisfactory or above satisfactory. That is where the problem is. That kind of feedback is very arbitrary, very not really professional. Some people may be very straightforward and they may call a spade a spade. Not all people will do that because they got their own fear in terms of their job, right? So I'm not mixing that feedback here. And that is when most of the training programs, the feedback is never bad. And The feedback there also can be to some extent manipulated. Before the feedback session starts, that day afternoon, you give a very good lunch. The lunch on that day will determine what kind of feedback levels you will receive. If you give very bad lunch, you may get a very low quality feedback. And if it is high, if you provide good lunch, maybe you will get a decent feedback. So there are differences in these two, right? So please understand, development center feedback cannot be equated or compared with the normal feedback that we take in the training and development sessions or the programs. Those are not as structured and as rigorous as these are. Okay. And coming to what you said about IIM and all that, you see, anonymous feedback has got its own merits. If you want people to be very critical, you ask for anonymous feedback and then you take it as it is. Because once it is anonymous, I can write what I genuinely feel about something. But if it's, but there are some people who encourage people to be very critical, even though it is not anonymous. Yeah, tell me, please.
I remember IIM days because they used to do correction immediately. Means suppose today some session is over and then they seek feedback from us and we send the feedback to them, of course anonymous, and the lecturer, we have observed this, the same facilitator or lecturer or whatever trainer would not be repeated in case of adverse feedback. So the readiness to correct is also important for this. Thank you very much.
Okay, now then you're going to the Kirkpatrick's 4-level feedback and you're talking about the first level, the reactions part of it. We take the feedback on reactions on a continuous basis, preferably on a daily basis, if not a session basis, subject to availability of your resources. Because as you said rightly, the correction is possible, a continuous feedback, but that is not on the individual participant. What you're talking about is generally on the training program or the training trainer himself and all. But what we are talking in a development center is the career positioning and the career progress of the individual. So the focus of the development center is the individual and in the context of the organization. What you are referring to is the trainer in the context of a training program. And there it is immediate reaction. That is why, if you use he is a good orator, he has got a very powerful presentation, style, or he rolls out numbers like anything, people will be flabbergasted, then they will get very good feedback. Or sometimes they may not get good feedback because people don't understand the numbers. And that takes into the effect in terms of repeatability of a trainer for the training program or the training center. That feedback, I'm differentiating that feedback from this feedback. Here it is related to career management, where it is related to repeatability of a trainer for a training program. Okay. So please understand these differences. Yeah. I hope I made the point clear.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, any other point that you want to make? What is the time now? So what?
It's 4 o'clock now.
4 o'clock. So shall we take a 5-10 minutes break?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so we will again come back at 4:15.
So I haven't had my lunch. Please give her like a 20 minutes.
Ma'am, you can have your lunch even otherwise.
Sir, no, I can't do two things at the same time. I need to concentrate because, otherwise I miss out on, you're teaching so well, so I don't want to miss out.
So what time shall we get back?
So is it okay if we get back at 4:24, exact 20 minutes from now? If
4:20.
others are okay.
Yeah, okay. If others are okay, I am okay with that.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
fair
Sir.
enough. 4:24. 4:24.
Okay,
4:20.
thank you.
We'll all get back at 4:20. All right?
So 4:24, so please.
Okay, 4:24. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
All
Okay,
right.
sir. We'll do that.
Okay. Okay. All right, I think we will comments. Shall we?
Yes, sir, we should.
Yeah, okay, great. We have spoken about the DC process, and also we discussed about what kind of a report it generates and what is the importance of feedback that is documented in the DC. Now let us understand how you enable the preparation of IDP. IDP, as I said, is Individual Development Plan. Have you ever experienced in being a part of a preparation of IDP? Does any one of you?
Not actually, but every year we need to write our P form, like we are calling it preference form. And in preference form, we are supposed to write, or we are expected to write as to what are our own training requirements are. And the organization is supposed to read it, go through it, and then arrange the training for us in the years to come. So that this is what the system we are following. But on very few occasions, I have found that after judging the person's traits or characteristics or plus minuses, he is being sent to the training. That very rarely I have found. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, any case, I let me share my experience. I was a part of an organization where these kinds of things are taken very seriously. And the career progression and the career path of an individual is very carefully monitored by the HR department from the day you join the organization, particularly not all levels. In this organization, there is something called, if you join the coveted management cadre, then you are a very, very precious talent for the organization. All coveted managers are tracked very meticulously, and their training programs and training requirements are planned very well. And the organization invests money in them. And then some of them, they end up as very senior level managers in the organization that will help the organization, sustainably run its operations. So the preparation of this training requirement before you are they identify the training requirements. Normally a person is sent for certain training programs. We did not call it as development center then, but people were sent for training programs, and several experienced, highly talented trainers were the observers during those training programs, some of the best trainers in the country. And they send a confidential report to HR department, and that reaches the line managers. The line manager will have discussions with the individual concerned, and individual concerned is also asked to identify the training requirements for him or for her. And then both are tallied by the divisional HR, not from the central HR, but the divisional HR. Then finally, all this culminates, it's several rounds of iterations. Finally, it ends up as a document which you will write as an individual, but is endorsed by your superior officer. And there, the kind of a training programs, the objectives for which you are going to be detailed further, all that is documented. It was generally for a period of 1 year. So all these documents are collected at a certain point in time. Preferably, I think if I remember it right, it was April. And before the next financial begins, most of the training programs which have been documented in those forms would have been completed. That means the central HR will identify the people with similar training needs. They will also identify the training agencies which will give the best of the training, whether national or international, depending on the level at which you are. If you are a certain level, you are sent for the national level training programs. If you are beyond a certain seniority, you will be sent for some international training programs. They will all be by the best of the schools or the best of the training institutes in the world. So these are all completely met by and large, unless there are some exigencies either at the individual level because of some personal problems he or she could not go, but they were all fulfilled. Why what I'm trying to impress upon you is there are some companies obviously which will take these things very serious, and they're all done in the best of their interest, both from the organization as well as the individual concerned. And not only that, the trainer goes through the training, but the training institute also provides feedback to the organization, which is confidential in nature. And the continuous assessment is always done for the purpose of two things, if I remember it right. One, to what level you can rise in the organization. One perspective they want to understand is if you have joined at a certain level, to what level of management ladder you can climb up, and how does the organization enable you to move further up by way of training and development. That is one objective. Number two is probably the retention dimension. How many of those people who are spotted for the talent requirements for the future will be retained by the organization, because the organization needs top-class managers for them to continuously run their operations. So these are the two objectives with which they have done, and I was fully aware of the entire process. I went through several training programs and discussed with the trainers themselves what they do, how they do, and all that. Therefore, what I'm saying is pretty authentic, right? So what were we doing? We were preparing a document, which is to the best of my knowledge, now I recollected it is around 8 pages document, which will detail so many important points about the individual and the kind of profile of work that you're doing, the profile of work that you would likely do in the coming 1 year, and what are the areas where you think you need improvement, what are the areas where the organization thinks that you should need improvement. All that was documented. Finally, on a page, both the individual concerned and the supervisor, the superior officer would sign with some timelines, what kind of a training program and all that, and that got documents gets into the record, which will be used by the HR department for our training department to send you for training program. And therefore, who is the owner of this document? Ultimately, it is the participant. You are writing your own training document, and therefore, you are setting a goal for yourself. The ownership for achieving that goal is that of individual. The organization responsibility is to simply facilitate and nothing more. It should not be very lengthy document, nor should it be too brief. In our case, it used to be about 8-page document, and sometimes it used to take close to half a day discussion with the supervisor. So the amount of time that was spent on the process were pretty significant. And you can imagine how much importance was given by this organization for the training and development and individual career growth. So IDP must be owned by the participant, and she needs to understand what development tasks or activities can be done and what might be difficult for them to do based on their own current role. In fact, one of the development techniques, which we'll discuss a little later, is job rotation. We had also got this, I have also gone through this job rotation process, where they will, if they think that you are an organizational resource, that is, you are a corporate resource, there are different levels of resource that they look at it, they look at people. Whether you're a division level resource or a corporate level resource, the exposure given to a person is different. So I was identified to be a part of the corporate level resource. Therefore, I was sent across various departments for understanding what they do, how they do, who are the people, what operations, all those stuff, you know, the business, HR, marketing, all those requirements to study. So one was the job rotation was done as a part of that training technique. So years later, you know, when I started doing much of teaching and training and not being a corporate person, I now understand how meticulously it was done back then, with an idea, with a view that as a person has been identified as a corporate resource, and he may be brought to the headquarters at any point in time for playing a bigger role. Therefore, preparing him for that job role is what was the objective at that point in time. And now when I look back, I think the kind of processes that they have to be very really appreciated. Now, the responsibility here has to be on the individual concerned, and the monitoring of that has to be done by the divisional manager. Whoever is your supervisor of the division, he has to take care of it. So we used to have a 3-month review cycle, both for professional development and the personal development. Professional development is business development, basically what you do on your business and what you do at the personal level in terms of your career growth. So in that 3-month review, the business development plan used to be presented in a group, but this personal development plan was discussed in a private room of the superior officer, but the report was prepared every 3 months. Can be tracked. These reports would be sent by him to the divisional HR. Divisional HR consolidates everything and sends it to the corporate HR. So action items that are used in IDP are on-the-job assignments, cross-functional projects, attending training programs, being coached and mentored, etc. These are all defined, identified and defined by the central HR back then. I think it is still the same in that organization. The standards of the training programs are pretty high, and therefore they know who to send where and what kind of competencies they want to build. They would track them and make sure that those competencies are achieved by them. So that is how, some of these top class companies, they survive perpetually because they invest a lot of money in their employees. So what is the objective? What are the objectives of IDP? IDP is basically clearly established development road map of the individual, and the IDP life cycle is generally 6 months to 2 years. Depends on what kind of nature of training that you're going through. And if it is for a succession planning, it can be pretty long, as much as 2 years. So 4 elements of the IDP, the competency and the indicators the participant wishes to focus on for the development. So you are writing that I want, for example, today's market, a lot of people want to do some training in digital transformation because several people do not have exposure for digital transformation and adopting to digital environment. So a lot of people want to get trained in digital transformation. Then the competency that you want to achieve is the digital transformation competency or digital adopting to digitalization. That is the competency that you want to achieve. Then you will set a target for 6 months or 1 year. And then how do you assess whether you have reached there? Then define the indicators, what would indicate your success or the progress in that direction, whether you've been able to achieve those indicators. Then what are the tasks and activities that the individual will do in order for development of this competency and behavioral indicator. One is going and doing some training, but then doing training is not important, not enough. You also should have training transfer. Whether this training transfer is taking place or not is what is going to be measured. Then what is the timeline? Whether you, for example, I want to do digital transformation. I may not go for a training program elsewhere. I may just do a training program by Coursera, identifying some of the best universities in the world and then finding out who is offering the training that I need for my industry. And that is what will be recorded. And the timeline for that, whether it is a 9-month program, a 6-month program, or a 12-month program, that will be recorded. The achievement of that is ultimately what are the indicators? One, you must pass the exam, obtain a certificate from the agency that is offering the training program, number 1. Number 2, you must be able to make use of those skills that you have learned or knowledge you have learned there in your day-to-day job, which may require 1, investment in the hardware and software. That is number 1. Number 2, further training of the employees within the organization. What will be the impact and outcome that they will achieve if they undergo this training this development program? Obviously, you must specify to the organization by letting you do this training program what is going to be the benefit for the organization in terms of productivity or business growth or whatever the indicator is. Any constraints, challenges that they foresee, or any support they need in order to ensure that these tasks are carried out well. Now, it might require some additional hand for you to substitute you in the training program during some critical periods, or reducing your target for the business during a certain period of the year. So whatever is required to enable you to successfully finish, foresee it, forecast it, foresee it, and then document it, so that the department does not suffer in its business, and you do not feel pressurized that you are doing something which is beyond your capacity. What will be the review mechanism to be ensured to ensure that the development plan has been achieved? So in our case, as I told you, it was a quarterly review, but then every organization has its own way of looking at it. It is not one size fits all. Here is a typical format. Unfortunately, I don't have the format that we used to follow then. Otherwise, I would have shown that particular document. But here is some example. So you write down all the name of the employee, position, current position, phone number, fax, email, and all that. Nowadays, of course, nobody uses fax, so you can put maybe Twitter or LinkedIn, whatever. Current supervisor's name, supervisor's title, the phone, office, and all that. Then goal for the successful performance, the current position, short-term career. What is the goal next 2-3 years? Long-term career goal, 3 years from now. What is the career goal? Then development objectives. What do you need to do this year to work towards your goals? So development activity, what you want to do. Proposed dates, estimated cost, date completed. Then employee signature and supervisor signature. That is, this document ensures that you are actually meaning what you're saying. You are practicing what you are speaking, and then the training program happens for the individual. So the goals, I think we've already discussed the preparation. You talk about the goals, then developmental objectives, and then determine the method of training, whether it is on the job, off the job, training program, or which should be done by an industry-based training program, or should be done by a university if it is something to do with the management kind of a thing. You can send the person to some business school, maybe IIM or some leading business school, some other leading business school in India, all that. Or if you are at a senior level, some business school across the world, which is leading, maybe Stanford, maybe Harvard, whatever. So those are the kinds of things that you need to look at. Then it has to be very clearly established with the employee that what you're doing and why you are doing, because it should not happen finally after the training is over, the organization, the individual should not feel that it is a square peg in a round hole and the whole effort goes for a toss. So understand the reasons why, the purpose why the training program is detailed for the employee, and then let him also understand what he can bring back to the table after the training. Quite often this kind of professionalism is not seen in many organizations, but then there are also organizations which follow this so professionally, so meticulously well, that each training program is pretty meaningful for both the sides. Then how do you do the review, and if there are some mid-course connections, how do you document in them? All those things you prepare. So this is a way to prepare the IDP. So there are some different organizations follow different formats. This is just one of them. Don't think that this is the only one. So identify anything that suits your organizational needs, and then if you can also implement the IDP at your own organization. Yeah. Any questions in this so far?
No, sir.
No. Okay. All right. So these all, I mean, everyone can design their own way and the organizational requirement. Sometimes there can be unplanned development opportunities. So if that is the case, it is not budgeted in the annual plan, then you have something which comes as a contingency, and then that can also be implemented. Okay, now we have crossed the stage of preparing the IDP. The next stage is what kind of training programs, what kind of techniques are there for the employee to be developed So this is all the interface with the DC. DC has played a very significant role in all this. And now you've come to a stage where the individual development plan has to be implemented. So the by development technique, what we mean is by which way of training and development one individual can achieve those competencies which are required to be achieved or which are there but not up to the level that is designed by the organization. So on a scale of 5, the organization expects you to be around 4 in achievement of a certain competency. Maybe you are still at 2, then you have to bridge the gap between 2 and 4. It may be even as simple a competency as communication skill. So if the organization is expecting a competency level of 4 and you are at 2, then you still have to be trained. Therefore, we must also know what kind of techniques can be used for developing the individual. One way of, there are several of them, and it is not that only one method will help the entire development process. You have to use multiple development techniques. One is management development programs. I think all of you are aware of it. Some of you may be already taking classes in some MDPs, and most of the trainers like us, we look forward for MDPs as a source of our regular revenue, because that is where we will fulfill the needs of organization by training people in certain knowledge areas of knowledge and skill. Then competency-based workshops, then job rotation, job enrichment, project-based learning, self-paced e-learning programs, open university programs. These are all the ways where methods that one can use in the development of employees. Yeah, you have any views on these training programs or development techniques? Any suggestions, feedback, perspective? Have you gone through any of those programs? Or have you?
Job rotation is quite common, job rotation, but in our case, it is, we can say, exactly the other extreme. Means from administration, they are shifted to marketing, and from, in case of derotation, which is actually being perceived as demotion, but from marketing to again administration, putting the people into training stream or training job is considered as the not so good job rotation, or so that. But again, that depends on the perception of the organization, the culture that is being developed throughout the ages, and so on and so forth. That is about the job rotation. What I wanted to ask is about the core of person. Every person will have his or her own core. And while giving the job rotation, whether this is being taken care of, and this needs to be that is what I think. So what is your take on this? Thank you very much.
No, as far as job rotation is concerned, I shared my experience with you. I have been immensely benefited by job rotation in my corporate job, where I was on a rotation for almost 1 year, going to various departments and doing some serious work in each department. And every month, my report was prepared by the concerned department where I was working on a temporary basis as part of job rotation. And also my reporting was originally where I reported, where I am placed. So 2 reports would go from these 2 departments to the central HR, the divisional HR, and they will compile these reports and then send a conversion report to the headquarters, at the corporate headquarters. So job rotation is a very, very common thing. In fact, job rotation, we were a bunch of people who were together, and we had fantastic learning experience about the whole business of the division. It's a multinational organization, therefore we were a part of one division, but name any operation of the division. At the end of 1 year, we were absolutely confident in responding to any question related to any of the operations of the division. Had we not been sent through this rotation, maybe we would have had experience in that narrow area of what you are doing. But what is the benefit of it? One, you had a holistic idea of how the business operates. So therefore, if some response comes from a certain colleague in a different department, either is supporting or opposing your some idea, then you will be able to understand why is it so and what should be done or how differently you have to think. So it made us, or at least it made me to think from their perspective. So we developed some kind of an empathy for others who are doing in the other departments. Number two, I think it has also given us a rapid rise in the organization. So the people who were put into this kind of a job rotation were the bunch of people who were fast trackers. And it followed, a quick succession of moving to the higher levels in the organization. So that made you, confident, your self-esteem has gone up, your ability to give back to the organization, your willingness to give back to the organization is improved. The talent retention is a good thing. Of course, in the medium term, in my batch, we were 4 of us. And after, I think within 6 years, all 4 of us have left the organization, despite all the investment that they made and they identified as fast trackers and this and that, but still we all left. So there is no guarantee that, you will stick to the job, but it definitely helped the organization. And we were able to contribute to the organization. I think that is what my take is on job. But then, yeah.
Yeah, right, sir. But changing the persons from this position to another position, not position, but maybe the department or maybe the job profiles, and maybe expecting or not expecting that person to excel in every phase, in every field, every department, making him not master of all, but also either not jack of all. It is said about the Vyas Muni, Vyasochistam Jagat Sarvam, कि ऐसे एक ही व्यास मुनि हो गए जिन्होंने सारे क्षेत्रों को छुआ और सब में इन एवरी फील्ड ही एक्सेल्ड. But very few people we can find in our day-to-day life that it can be compared with the Vyas Muni. He has excelled in, he or she has excelled in almost all field wherever he or she has entered. So that was the case. Means I'm talking from the core point of view to this Vyas point of view, we can say. कि बहुमुखी प्रतिभा के धनी है, ऐसे बहुत कम लोग होंगे. तो इसके लिए मैं था. Thank you very much.
Okay, I tell you, I think we used to have this typical conversation on, I'm a core management professional, so I'm a thorough professional manager, I would say. One of the questions that we used to debate and discuss in various fora was, IAS officers, for example, you take. An IAS officer can be a managing director for an electronics corporation. Then he can be a managing director for a housing corporation. Then he can be a managing director for a coal corporation, like that. So just because of IAS, they are rotated and they made CMDs of various corporations, which are pretty unrelated. They're all very diverse in their businesses. So the question is, how can one person be an effective manager of so many kinds of diversified areas of business? Isn't it one of the reasons why some of the Indian corporations are not doing well? Well, I think that is the kind of problem that you are foreseeing. If I'm, for example, I'm in human resource management, and I've been put through a thorough job rotation, a very structured operation of job rotation, then I am asked to move to, let us say, it is unlikely that I may be moved to finance, because the part of job rotation, we moved to finance because they wanted us to understand and appreciate the financial dimensions of the business acumenship requirements of the finance. But not that I would ever go and do a financial manager's job or a finance controller's job. It requires certain basic understanding of finance. But a HR manager could go and work in a marketing department, and same way the marketing department person can come and work as a HR, right? I mean, it's quite possible. There are examples which I know that HR people have been put in charge of the marketing, and then they have done very, very well. See, there, the talent we are talking about is completely different. So these are high talented people. The exposure given to them is good enough for them to do multiple roles because they have those basic qualities. So one of the answers for that IAS officer being made different, running the different kinds of corporations is the Peter Sanjay's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So these people, they have that essential qualities, the 7 qualities that any businessman requires. And you don't have to be a technician for that. You don't have to know the coal production processes. You don't have to know the housing related laws and things like that. There are professional managers who will come and support you. You can dig into their support. But the 7 habits of the effective managers is what makes them successful in any role. That is what is important. And when I talked about this job rotation being used as a technique for development, we are not using these techniques for junior level. At least they're definitely not for the junior level. We are talking about mid to senior level, and those are all high potentials and who can adapt to various kinds of situations and who have the ability to take on those challenges and run the businesses successfully. So those are the people we are referring to. Otherwise, if you take a junior level person, it may be a disaster. You put an admin guy in marketing or a marketing guy in admin, it may be a disaster. So it is not that just the rotation to be done for the sake of rotation is not enough. It has to be a well thought out, well informed decision with clear goals on both the individual and his contribution to the corporate. I think this is the point that I would like to convey to you, Jagannath-ji.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
If it is done as a well thought out decision, it works very well. In fact, there are several examples where people have started with a very, very different role from what finally made them the CEOs of organization because of various development techniques. Okay, now we will not get into that. Yeah, but what about others? You are not speaking? Priyaji, Padma Priyaji, Anilji, none of you are speaking. You have no experiences in this to share?
No, sir, we think about Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. When I told this interesting book, so when you mentioned that, I thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, those 7 qualities are what makes them, extraordinary achievers, irrespective of the context in which they work. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Priya, madam. Anything from your side?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Now let's get into the details of these things. I think if you can understand some little bit of it, you're done with that. So MDPs basically are you have very high expensive training programs to very ordinary management development programs. Unfortunately, in India, these MDPs are not very popular, except some of those things conducted by XLRI, IIMs and all. If you look at the US, in US, there are several agencies which conduct the management development programs on a regular basis. Some of them are not part of any university. Some of them are conducted by the industry. In the US, there is a concept called corporate universities. So corporate universities are almost about 4,000 to 5,000 top companies in US have got their own universities. In the American law, corporates can set up their own universities and run their training programs. In India, if you want to call yourself a university, you have to have the UGC recognition, which is a lot different process altogether. So in India, though we have very rich corporations, we don't have corporate universities. But several corporate universities in other countries run the management development programs. And one example, till recently, of course, GE had one of the greatest management development program center at Crotonville, there, which was set up by Jock Welch when he took over the corporation as a CEO, and he set up a great training institution for training the leaders. The leadership training program of GE offered there was extremely popular one, so much so that they started offering the program not only for their own managers. Initially, it was thought to be an internal training center, but later on, the demand grew, and then they started offering the training program for any other company nominating their persons and paying their whatever the fees. But recently, I think they have sold it off to somebody else. But otherwise, it was one of the finest examples of conducting the MDP's leadership development programs. They are very, very popular there. So it can range from 6 months to 2 years, includes a lot of case studies and assignments, and have a defined course curriculum that needs to be covered. It's like any other academic program. The only difference there and an academic program is it is highly applied. So you don't teach any theory or you don't teach any textbook material there. It is all through experienced managers, senior level managers who come and share experiences so that your manager skills develop, and it is mainly for the leadership purpose. And there are two types. One is what I told you about the Crotonville's training program, which is the training program is fixed, the curriculum is fixed. People from different companies can come together and learn. There are other training programs which are customized to a training particular organization. So you design a program for that organization, and then you lead the program only in their context. So these are the two variants. One is open kind of MDPs, the other one is customized training programs for a particular company. So that is what is about MDPs. Then competency-based workshops designed specifically for the enhancement of specific competencies focused on a particular competency or one or two specific behavioral indicators at a time, provide necessary skills and techniques to the participants in order to start building those competencies. Must be the same competencies for which DC have been conducted. That is, what it basically means is, in the DC, you have identified some training needs. So send the persons for training programs in the competency-based workshops only for those competencies, because you want to fill that gap. Otherwise, it is not going to help. And here the objective is to focus on which are the competencies that you want to improve in that person in the immediate future. Identify those kinds of training programs and send them there so that the gap in their competency levels will come down. So avoid using an extra existing development program and convert it into a competency-based workshop. So that mistake should not be done. Assessment should not be done. An assessment is an assessment, and the workshop is to develop you further. So don't mix these two and try to project as if DC itself is a workshop for the development of an individual. That's a bad practice. Then we have job rotation. I think we have discussed a lot about job rotation. One of the effective techniques, it is basically identified for those people who are considered to be versatile performers, who will be useful in the longer term in multiple departments, in multiple ways, at multiple levels even, and then that will benefit the individuals as well as the organization. Job enrichment is slightly different. Here, the individual concerned is perceived to be a high potential individual, and before he could be promoted to take different levels of responsibility, what you do is you enrich his role, give him more responsibilities, give him more independence, ask him to do something different in a project, and see how he performs. So here you are actually enriching the job of the individual. That means you're challenging the individual concerned to do a higher, different kind of a job. And if he is able to successfully perform in that particular role, which also indicates that his potential is really true and he should probably be promoted. So in job rotation, you work at the same level in different departments. In job and enrichment, you will not go to any other department. You will work in the same department, the same role, but your job profile will be enriched to check whether you have the ability and the potential to carry on higher level of responsibilities. If that happens, then after successfully observing you for a certain period of time, the organization can place you at a higher level. That is, it can give you a vertical rise. Whereas in the job rotation, there's nothing vertical, it is only horizontal. Yeah, then project-based learning. What do you know of project-based learning? What do you know of project-based learning and how is it going to be implemented in organizations?
It depends on the organizations maybe changing strategy, and they may select the people for that particular new projects like this. And then they will select the people and then they will train them or make them learn into those new techniques. Is that the project-based learning, sir?
Okay, we will examine that, yeah.
So may I, sir? I don't know this, correct? Yeah, we are our lift manufacturing company. Our factory is. We started manufacturing escalators, so we send some people to China to get that learning about escalators and all that. Is it come as a project-based learning, sir?
Okay, okay, we will examine that. Good. So you have got two perspectives, right? Yeah. Anybody else? All right. I'll just give you a situation where a top class company wants to identify a successor for the CEO. Okay. It could be any one of the top class companies in the country. They want to identify a successor for a CEO position. How do you think they will go about doing that? How do you identify a successor for an MD or a CEO of an organization? A big organization, let's say some 50,000 crore company.
They must have a succession plan, no, sir? They undergo.
How do they do that? Yeah, how do you prepare a plan?
They must have identified some potential and capable persons on their company, and they keep on giving them trainings and equip them for this leadership role.
Who will recommend them? Who will identify them?
Succession planning is part of HR's role, no, sir?
At a CEO level, HR can do very little. I mean, what does a CEO, how HR department know about who should be the successor of the existing CEO? They can only prepare some papers and they don't have much of a role in identifying the next CEO.
Yes, sir. Right.
So generally, a CEO is generally identified by the existing CEO. He has to recommend from among his team members. Every organization will have policies. Either should have an external person or internal person. Many of the good companies, a good practice is to have an internal person as a CEO, because if you are bringing an external person as a CEO, who will be interested in your company? But ultimately, the aspiration of many of the number twos in the organization is to become number one. If the number one is going to be from outside, no number two is interested in continuing in your organization. So the role of this succession management in this case will be the current CEO has to identify some 2 or 3 people from among his deputies, the number twos in the organization, who could probably be the replacement for him certain future date. So typically for a CEO level, then the exercise starts some 4 years in advance. Who should be the CEO for the existing incumbent CEO? The process will start around 4 years time. It could be any time between 2 to 4 years, depending on the nature of the company and the business. Now, let us say somebody has identified, and after the CEO identifies the names, each one of these people will be examined by the board of directors of the company. They will probably have a dinner or a lunch meeting, and each one of them will look at them. They'll have very cool discussions during a lunch or a lunch or a dinner, and then they will prepare their own confidential report of that person in terms of how this fellow is and what his weaknesses are, strengths are, capabilities are, all that. Now, at the end of that process, let us say 2 of them have been identified. Now, out of the 2, who should be the successor? Because anyone who becomes a successor, the second will feel automatically be let down. But then your objective is not to let him down. Your objective is also to communicate to him that we have selected the best of the 2 because there's only one position. Now, one technique that people use in the corporates is the project-based learning. What they do is they give 2 projects to these 2 possible people, the successors, and ask them to execute those projects. That they'll be usually pretty challenging, requires high level of finesse of managerial skills, and then that will also determine what the outcome of that particular project will also determine whether they will be able to move forward. And in these organizations, there's no budget for the constraint of budget does not exist, so there's no problem at all. So what these people are supposed to do is execute those projects, which involves a lot of decision making, which involves a lot of people management, which involves a lot of product and process management, all that. Now, during the execution of this project-based learning, they will be assessed by some identified people. In this case, the CEO himself may do it. And then the strategies they adopt, the techniques they use, the way they manage their resources, the way they manage their human resources will all lead to somebody being superior than the other. And that whoever is superior in those areas probably will be the replacement of the CEO for the current CEO. This is a macro level example. Where did I use this project-based learning? Here, you are making them to go through the experience of a project. The project may be a few thousand crore project. Because we are talking about a 4-year span. 4 years is a good enough time for setting up a new product, launching a new product, setting up a new division, expanding the market, expanding to a different country, whatever it is. And therefore, you will have to demonstrate various levels of managerial skills. Some of them you might have, some of them you might not have. And those skills are learned during this project-based learning. Project-based learning, you are taking a project, you are executing that. Some competencies you might have it, some competencies you develop it. Ultimately, the success of the launching of the project will depend on whether you are capable or not. And that capacity to learn those abilities is what is important in project-based learning. And those out of the 2, whoever is more successful probably will be in as the new incumbent. And the second one, if he feels that it's a very genuine and methodical process and purely based on merit, obviously the second person will not feel let down, because ultimately the merit will prevail in some organizations and nothing else. And this can happen even at a middle level or a senior level managers. People can be given certain projects under the supervision of some seasoned manager, and they will execute the project. And in the process, they will learn certain new skills, which are required as recommended in the DC. As recommended in the DC. I hope I have made the point clear. Then mentoring. Mentoring is another very useful and unique way of developing talent and developing people. A mentor generally is a senior level person in the same organization who has a lot of experience, who knows the entire business, and then he will guide or mentor somebody who is junior, and this is a highly focused way of doing the development process. And the individual concerned will go through the learning process with the senior manager, and that will help him to develop himself for a future, a bigger role in the future. Then self-paced e-learning. These days it is really catching up. A lot of companies do it. I'm aware of one financial markets major in the international markets who enables this process for their employees, both in self-paced e-learning model or even a campus-based learning model. They support the employees, they invest their money, and then they develop them because they will be the future resources for the organization. Now, what is this self-paced e-learning? You will be allowed to pursue some course which will be beneficial for you to fix the gap in your competencies as identified during the DC. Like I gave you the example of digitalization skills in the organization, and if a particular employee in the marketing department is unable to cope with the digitalization that is rapidly happening in his industry, he or she might go for a training program identified on maybe a Coursera, edX, Khan Academy, or LinkedIn, whatever the platforms that you have, wherever it is relevant from the industry perspective and relevance from the competency that is being fixed for the individual, and then they will be asked to pursue that course online, which is purely self-paced. But then there will be a time limit. You have to finish this course within such and such a time, and then you will have to produce a certificate that you have successfully completed the training program. That will be another mode of doing it. In this, there are two ways that organizations do the training program. In one mode, the organization pays the concerned agency directly the fee. The fee part of it is sponsored. The sponsorship is done by the company directly from the very beginning. But in the second model, the organization might tell the individual, first you finish, pay it from out of your pocket, finish the training program. After successful completion, give us the certificate, will reimburse you the cost. I mean, both are possible. So here, since it's an adult learning program here that we're talking about, related to a certain level of professionals, the methodology of the training program has to be completely different, customized to the context. You have to evaluation also, you have to customize to the context, because they're all senior level executives, maybe are middle level executives. They are busy with their own ways in their day-to-day functions, and yet they are stretching out for doing this training program for their benefit as well as for their organization's benefit. What you should do is design the program in such a way it is more application oriented, more employee friendly for their job roles, and helps them to realize their full potential at a short pace of time. In this, the organization plays a very important role in identifying the learning programs that one can go through, because if they are funding, they have an ultimate say in terms of what programs you can attend or what programs you cannot attend. Then you have got the open university programs. It's not open university alone now. You have online programs, open and distance learning programs. So there are so many variants that have come. Not only that, these days, the government of India has also said you can do 2 different degree programs simultaneously. Till about 2 years ago, you should only be student of one university at a point in time. You cannot be figuring in 2 different universities or institutions, but now that is gone. Now, the organizations are encouraging people to pursue the open and distance learning programs offered by various reputed colleges or not so reputed colleges. In India now, there is no differentiation, no limitation. Anybody can, most of the colleges are eligible for offering this distance education programs. and the HR department will encourage the employees to identify a suitable program for them and then enroll in that. Guidelines are given to which programs, in which programs you can register, and as long as you follow those guidelines and submit those details to HR department recognizes that the program is valid. So what is the validity here meaning? The program should be offered by a certain standard of university or a college, and you must show the proof of enrollment there, and rest of it is you pursue the program, and based on the guidelines of the organization, they will reimburse the fees at some point in time. So there is open university programs, and there are plenty of them now. If any one of you are, if all of you are MBAs, that's okay. If some people are not MBAs and you want to aspire for doing, you're aspiring for doing an MBA, it is an ideal time for going for an online or distance learning MBA. It is really catching up, and a lot of push is given by the government of India for promoting those kinds of development programs. And once you do the MBA program online or even distance moding, in terms of validity, it is the same, and therefore it helps the individual to grow in his professional endeavors. Any questions? Yeah? No questions? Am I making sense? Is it all getting?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, now I think we have come to the last part of it. Now, why are we doing all this? What is the purpose? Ultimately, as a training professional, you're all trainers. Either you are already trainers or you're aspiring to be trainers, or you already been a trainer and you want to formalize it with a training degree or a diploma here. So therefore, you are here. How is it going to help? Basically, in what way the DC is helping the organization? The DC helps the organization talent management. You are a part of a talent management process, and therefore it is very, very critical to the organizations. So what do you do, in which way you contribute to the organization's growth? You are identifying the participant or the participant who has come along with certain prescription in terms of the competencies. You are preparing him or her for the next stage of her or his professional life. So that's a very positive thing. Anything that gives birth to positivity is always exciting, and therefore what you do as a part of the DC is something is exciting. It is a growth process, and hence you are contributing to the growth process of person as well as the organization. Then you are providing a roadmap as a part of DC. You are providing a roadmap for the individual to grow, and that roadmap preparation is an expert's job. It is a skilled job. It requires a lot of experience, and you are contributing to that. Therefore, your role as an expert is pretty important and useful for the organization. Then, at the organization level, your contribution can be, as a DC manager, your contribution can be assessed because your contribution, the aggregate of all the people who have gone through the DC process and the development activities. Therefore, that is the sum and substance, the cumulative, growth of all these people is what your contribution to the organization is. And therefore, as a DC manager, you're doing something which your organization and yourself will be proud of, and your colleagues will be proud of. And then identifying and creating a common development program that ensures that each individual's development needs are met in this customized program. This requires a certain amount of insights into the business, industry, the business, the economy, and a lot of research has to be done by the individual concerned to be able to come out with a good design of the program. Otherwise, any run-of-the-mill program design will not work. Like I said, GE's leadership development program is world-class, which is truly world-class, and therefore it had takers from every part of the globe, irrespective of the kind of industry they were working with, right? And as a part of the development process, on-the-job assignments, cross-functional teams, and other projects can be given to the participant to ensure that they get an opportunity to develop those competencies, and which also means the training as a DC manager, you must have, it's a prerequisite knowledge for the DC manager. You should be familiar with all the techniques and how they get implemented, so that you are authentic when you are when these participants speak to you, and you are able to respond to them with the level of authenticity that is required. Monitoring and coaching process can be provided as a part of the development plan of the participants. Now, the textbook also gives you this talent management 9-box matrix, which is a very simple thing. It is sort of an adoption from some other 9-box matrix. So therefore, you should be able to easily understand this. On the one side, you look at the performance of the individual, which is available through various documents in the organization, particularly the performance appraisal documents. And on the other side, you look at the potential of the individual. So performance, you put it to 3 divisions: weak, adequate, and strong. Similarly, potential, weak, adequate, and strong. Now, obviously, the strong and strong at the highest level, that is the 9th position, is the best position. That kind of a person is irreplaceable in the organization. He or she will have exceptional performance and very strong future potential. That means such people are tipped for the highest position in the organization. And the second, at the 8th level, if you see, they have got adequate performance and yet exceptional rate of growth. Their potential is extremely good. So those are all these future stars, and therefore they are also required for the organization to be, be able to sustainably maintaining their competency level. And at the 7th level, you have got very weak performance currently, but exceptional rate of growth. That is, the potential is pretty high. Now, this is something which is very important that is happening in the organizations. People are now recognizing, because it's a competency-based assessment of individuals and competencies of individuals, that a person may not be extremely good performer, but he has got extremely good potential. Then you require them. So such people are coachable. They can be trained to perform. So if you have got the competencies, but not backed by the current performance, you can be coached to do a better performance. So from 7, you can move to 8, or 8, you later on to 9. So those 3 are very, very important. Now let us come to 6. Now, current star, exceptional performance, improving moderately. So here, the potential is not significantly seen, but then the performance levels are pretty good. They are current stars, and they may not grow as you have seen in the top 3 cells, but such people can also move up the ladder, though not as fast as the other 3. Now, solid, number 5, is adequate performance and improving moderately. Okay, they are not exceptional performers, but I think you still need them. But looking at 4, 3, 2, 1, one has to be a bit careful. What kind of training programs, whether they will yield results, because when you will only bet on those people who have the potential for development. And if the potential is missing, mere performance is there today, that means their thinking levels, their strategic thinking levels are limited. Therefore, they may not be suitable for very senior roles in the future. But if you want to keep them at a steady and a reasonable growth rate, perhaps you can look at number 3 and number 5. But 1, 2, and 4 are questionable. If the organization doesn't want those kinds of people, you need not invest in their development process, because it's difficult for them to sustain the development in the longer run, and they may not be helpful in the organization. So this is what this talent management 9-box matrix is. I think that brings us to the end of this course as such. And if you have any questions on any one of those things that we discussed, I'm ready with that. Yeah, okay, Jagannath ji. Yeah, please go ahead, Jagannath ji.
About these 9 boxes only, because it considers 2 things, that is potential and performance.
Yes.
Right, sir? So these boxes, 9 boxes theory, you rightly said it is for the succession planning, right? Means
No, it is not
or
succession.
no?
It is for talent
Not
management. See, in HR,
talent, yeah,
you have
and
studied
talent.
Blake and Morton also gave a 9 boxes, 9x9, 3x3 matrix, which is a 9-box leadership model. This is adopted, I think, from that by these authors, and they have used it.
So the purpose is not succession planning, but the talent management of these 9 boxes.
Succession planning is one of the one of the roles the DC plays. But the succession management is very limited because you don't keep on replacing the top talent every year. But otherwise, the DC is the development process is for most of the other roles, right? So you have, if you're able to visualize the person in this 3x3 matrix and identify where you fall, depending on that, your training, your potential is first known. Depending on your potential and your current performance, you can be also looked at what kind of a training requirements are there, what kind of learning requirements are there for person. There are people in the organization who have got high potential but low on performance, and there are people who are high on performance but low on potential. Typically, what happens in organization, Jagannath Ji, is that we promote people based on their performance, but that doesn't lead you to creation of good leadership pipeline. Performance is not enough for somebody to get promoted. You also should get the potential. A lot of potentials who are strategic thinkers may not really be performing the demonstrating the performance as some other people are performing. So organizations today are believing that it is not enough to have good performance to have promotability. It is also equally important to have good potential. So that is how it is. And if you are the potential and you want to perform somebody to improve their performance, identify what programs will give them the desired performance. Similarly, if somebody is very good in their performance, but their potential is to be stretched, then you need to further build on their potential, send them for training programs which are required for developing their potential. So this metrics gives you an idea of what kind of development centers related programs or suggested programs can be identified for managing effectively the talent of the organization.
Okay, sir. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any other question, madam? Priya madam, Padma Priya madam, Anil ji. So we have successfully covered all the content of the course, Development Center Management, and those who have followed all these sessions, either online or subsequently by watching the videos, should not have any problem in going through the test or your assignments. But if you still have any doubts anytime, please feel free to contact me. I'm there to support you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, any other?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So if nothing else is there, we can close this call. And thank you very much to all of you for your active participation, and wish you all the best for the coming exams in this particular course and also other courses. Wish you all success, and hopefully all of you will join the fraternity of trainers very soon.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
a lot.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Right. I take leave of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.